So yeah, it's this week for Parashat Behar. We asked probably one of the more famous and basic questions there is to ask on a pasuk in the Torah.
Yeah, it's actually a phrase that represents the question of all questions. עניין שמיטה אצל Har Sinai. Whatever you want to say, what are these two things even connected? That's the term you use. What does Har Sinai have anything to do with Shemita? Our Parsha is even called Har Sinai, Har Sinai, but nothing about the Parsha has anything to do with Har Sinai.
Exactly. So why does the Torah feel the need to mention that this is being said in Har Sinai? Of course, there are many answers to this question. We talked about the Pshat level, tried to see how the fact that this Parsha is said in Har Sinai, we see through the entire Parsha. And what does it mean for us? How are all these mitzvahs that we see in the Parsha connected to Har Sinai? How is it relevant for us? And what incredible, important lesson does the Parsha have for us today in our day and time? Hope you enjoy it. Take a look. So this week for Parshat Behar, I want to discuss one of the more famous and basic questions in the Torah, a question that is so basic that it has even become a phrase in Hebrew, Ma Inyan Shemita etzel Har Sinai. What does Shemita have to do with Har Sinai? And this phrase, this question came up because the Parsha begins with HaKadosh Baruch Hu talking to Moshe in Har Sinai. The Torah states, Vaydaber Hashem and Moshe lemor behar Sinai. And then it moves on to continue talking about the mitzvah of Shemita. And really, you have to wonder, what does it have to do with each other? Why does the Torah have to mention Har Sinai when it talks about the mitzvah of Shemita? And of course, there are many answers to this. Rashi asked this question. There are many midrashim, but like we like to do in our videos, I want to talk about on the Pshat level, on the simple level, try to understand, what does this mean? Why does the Torah have to state this? Why does the Torah tell us that the mitzvah of Shemita was given in Har Sinai?
Yeah, it's not only the opening pasuk, it's even the name of the Parsha. You hear the Parsha called Behar, you think it has to do with a mountain, but nothing but that first pasuk has anything to do with Har Sinai. So it seems. So obviously there's something here. And I think to understand it, I think what we need to do is actually jump to the end of the Parsha. Because we've seen this format, just like in Kedoshim, Parashat Kedoshim, where we have the opening, we have a set of mitzvot, and then we have the closing words. And I think if we look at the Parsha as a whole, we'll begin to understand why it starts with the Har Sinai. And I think it's not just about Shemita. I think the entire Parsha is actually tied to that opening pasuk. And if we jump to the end, just before the end, we'll see the following pasuk. Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim, avadaihem, asher hotzeti otam me'eretz Mitzrayim, ani Hashem Elokechem. Am Yisrael are my servants. They're here in the world. They're my servants, and repeats it, my servants, and not Paros, right? I took them out of Egypt, and I brought them to be my servants. What does this have to do with the Parsha? Why does this show up here? And if we go through the whole Parsha, we'll notice something fascinating. And there are different psukim also within the process that connect to the same point. The Parsha is talking about seemingly many different things. Shemita is talking about letting the land rest. We have the Yovel. We have different situations where you purchase land and then you're able to get the land back. We have different things that have to do with how you treat someone poor or not using the fact that you are powerful over someone else. It's interesting. One of the terms that show up more than once in our Parsha is the concept of lo tirdeh bo befarech. Sounds very much like Mitzrayim, where there we were oved befarech. They treated us one way. It seems that the whole Parsha is somehow a comparison to Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, they had power over you. They controlled you. They felt they have control over the entire world. That's how they treated the world, and that's how they treated you. And now when you leave Mitzrayim, I don't want you to just be free from Mitzrayim and build your own Mitzrayim. This is your opportunity. You got out of them, and now you're going to have your own land. You're going to have your own slaves, and you're going to create your own version of Egypt. Not at all. The whole purpose of leaving Mitzrayim, as it shows up right from the beginning when Hashem comes to Moshe, he says, "V'zeh lecha ha'ot." This is going to be the sign. Ki anochi shlachticha, that I sent you. What's the sign? Not that you'll get out of Egypt, not that you'll have miracles. That when you leave Egypt, you'll go right from there to Avdun et ha'elokim al har hazeh. You'll come serve me on this mountain. Har Sinai, Har Sinai represents the fact that when we left Egypt, we didn't just leave. We're in the middle of Sfirat HaOmer, building up towards Matan Torah. We left Mitzrayim and we started to step up step by step until Har Sinai. Har Sinai represents the fact that leaving Egypt is not just about being free. And every single mitzvah in this Parsha is around that. When you have your own land, realize it's a present. You have that land, but the Har Sinai, I already had a contract with you. And from day one, I said, I'm giving you this land so you can do what you need to do. As one of the psukim in our Parsha says, why? Latet lachem et Eretz Canaan, to give you Eretz Yisrael. Why? Liot lachem le'Elohim, to be your God. You receive the land for a purpose. If you fulfill that purpose, great. If you lose it, not so great. Part of recognizing that the land isn't yours, that the land was given to you for a purpose, is the fact that you don't feel that ownership. The minute that one time every 7 years you have a year that you have to just let go. It's not your land. But many other mitzvot too. It's yovel. It's the fact that even when you legally purchase something from someone, there's a way for them to get their land back. And this goes on with how you treat people. You don't own land, but you don't own people. Don't treat them that way. Everything goes back to that same point. When you left Mitzrayim, it was to create a better world, not to create the same thing, not to be free, not to be powerful. It's to create a better world. And the key to this better world is Har Sinai, is that moment when we accept upon ourselves that we aren't free in the sense we can do whatever we want. The opposite. We are free in the sense that we accept upon ourselves to what's best for us, to what's most true for us, which is the Torah, which was given to us by our Creator, by the Creator of the world, and guides us in this world to be true to who we really need to be. That's the true freedom. That's Har Sinai. And everything in our Parsha is coming to teach us and to remind us again and again, don't treat people like the Egyptians. Don't feel that ownership. Remember that Hashem is giving this to you as a present for its purpose, so you can fulfill your purpose that you received in Har Sinai.
Very good, very good. You know, since we are already towards the end of Sefer Vayikra, we've gone through so much since Yetziat Mitzrayim, so many Shabbatot, so many Parshas. Sometimes it's hard to remember that we are right after Yetziat Mitzrayim. And the whole purpose of Yetziat Mitzrayim is and was to get to Har Sinai. That was the whole purpose. When, like you said, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to Moshe, when Moshe goes to Paro, he says to him, let my people go. Everybody loves to quote this pasuk. Everybody likes to quote those words, let my people go. But actually, the pasuk has one more word in Hebrew. The pasuk says, Shlachami v'yavduni. You have to let my people go, but for a purpose, not in order so that they will be free and do whatever they want out in the world, but no, you have to let them go v'yavduni in order to go and serve me. That's why you have to let them go. They're going from Mitzrayim to Har Sinai, and this Ma'amad Har Sinai, Matan Torah, accepting the Torah, getting the Torah happens before we enter the land. We cannot enter the land without getting the Torah first. We have to take the Torah with us, and with that we enter the land. With that we go to Eretz Yisrael, which is our new home, in order to build our home there, just like you're saying, not like Mitzrayim, but like the state, like the nation that we are supposed to build in our homeland according to the Torah, to make sure that the values, to make sure that the moral is a just moral, to make sure that the values are high values, to build a nation of holiness, mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, moral that comes from the Torah, moral that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from God himself, from Har Sinai, not a moral that was made up by mankind, a moral that can be twisted around and be thrown at the good and claim that they're doing bad, like we're seeing right in front of our eyes, especially this week, but a moral, but values that come from Shemaim, that come Har Sinai. Take those values, and with that you build a nation. With that you build your nation in your homeland, in your Eretz. This is what Yetziat Mitzrayim was all about, and maybe this is what the Torah is reminding us over here, that you're about to go into the land, these mitzvahs that have to do with the land. Don't forget, you are coming from Har Sinai. This is all together. Take Har Sinai with you into there. And when you get to Eretz Yisrael, remind yourself every 6-7 years for a full year that Har Sinai is there, that you have to live your life according to Har Sinai. Refocus yourself, recalibrate yourself, like we discussed in the videos about Shemita, what Shemita is about. Recalibrate your life to make sure that the Har Sinai continues being that North Star. The Matan Torah is your North Star for life, is what provides you the reason and the meaning and the justice for everything you do in your life. And remembering that Am Yisrael came out from Mitzrayim in order to go to Har Sinai, to worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. And like you were saying, the Parsha is filled with these concepts of avdut, of slavery, avodat parech, of working hard like we had in Mitzrayim. You would think really, like people love to quote, let my people go, that Am Yisrael were taken out of Mitzrayim to be free. But like we said, we were taken out of Mitzrayim in order to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be Avdei Hashem. And Rabbi Yehuda Levi has a very famous short poem that he wrote that we mentioned a few times about serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is very fitting for this Parsha of Avdei Azman, Avdei Avadim, Eved Hashem Hu Levado Chofshi, and then there's another line. But this very famous sentence, this is what Shemita is about. Not only Shemita in the beginning of the Parsha in Yovel, but also what the Parsha ends with, like you're saying, with the pasuk Et Shabtotai Tishmoru, keeping Shabbos. Because this is the way, through Shemita, through Yovel, through Shabbos, you sanctify time. You remind yourself through time that you are the servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You are not a servant of time. You are not Avdei Azman, like Rabbi Yehuda Levi says. Avdei Azman, Avdei Avadim Hem. If you are a servant of time, if you are a slave of time, if you are a slave of everything around you, of the physical, materialistic world around you, you are a slave of slaves, because everything makes you work even harder. The things you are working for are making you work even harder in order to get even close to where you want to get to. Everything builds on top of everything else. But Eved Hashem hu levado chofshi, somebody who is the servant of God, somebody who is the slave of God, he himself is really free. This is the free person. And this is what Shemita, Yovel, Shabbat are about. Disconnecting from the slavery of time, disconnecting from being a slave of time and putting yourself on that level of living a life with a higher meaning, with a higher purpose that brings holiness into the world. This is what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says over there. Maybe this is what the Parsha is actually telling us. But then Rabbi Yehuda Halevi has something else very interesting. In Sefer HaKuzari that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi also writes, there's a question over there from Melech Kuzar where he asks the Chaver, he asks the rabbi he's talking to, he says to him, I don't get it. You want to move to Eretz Yisrael, you want to move to this land in order to put on yourself more obligations? Why would one want to do that? Don't you want to go and have more freedom? Don't you want to take off your self-obligations and live a more free life so that you won't have to work that hard? And Rabbi Yehuda Halevi answers to, if you're asking that question, that means you didn't really understand. Because what happens in life is you become a slave of everyone else. Avdut harabim, says Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. You become a slave of the trends around you, of what people are chasing around you, of what society is chasing around you. That's what life is about. But once you become a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a servant of God, you put yourself aside from these things. You disconnect from what's trendy, from what society wants from you, and you put yourself in this place where what's important for you is the higher values of the Torah, is the higher values that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us to live by. And by this you become really free. By this, disconnecting yourself from Avdut HaRabim, from chasing the trends of the society around you, you can really become free, because the trends of society around you keeps on changing and keeps on demanding from you more materialistic things and more earthly things. And slowly you become Avdei Hazman, Avdei Avadim, you become a slave of slaves. And this is what I'm asking for myself, says Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. And maybe this is what this Parsha is about. This is exactly the connection between Har Sinai to Shemita, to Yovel, and even more so to the person who becomes poor and has to sell himself. Why did he become poor? Is he chasing the wrong things in life? Is he chasing that materialistic world? Does he have to go sell himself to a master? And we know that according to Torah, slavery and a master is nothing like you're thinking about that we know from the textbooks or from the slavery that we've seen in the past in the world. Slavery in the Torah, a master in the Torah, somebody who has a slave, he's obligated. If they only have one bed, he has to give him the bed. If he only has one portion of food, he has to give him his food. As the Gemara says, somebody who has a slave, he actually owns the master for himself, because there's so many obligations between somebody who owns the slave, so-called, because it's not about the slavery. You're not even allowed to make him work hard. It's more about education. It's more about teaching the person who owns a slave, and it's about setting the slave back straight to a life of values, to a life living according to the Torah. This is what the Parsha is about. And you know, we also have to look a second at the question from the Kuzari, like the Kuzari asked Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and he says to him, I don't get it, coming to Eretz Yisrael, doesn't it mean you have more obligations to do and more things you have to do? And the answer is yes, there is more obligations coming to Eretz Yisrael. And you know, seeing it this week and thinking about everything that we've been going through, everything that's been going on here in Eretz Yisrael, both here in Eretz Yisrael, but also around the world, that's an outcome of what's going on over here. Yes, coming to Eretz Yisrael has its obligations. We have our mechuyavuyot. We have things we have to do. We have things that we can't run away from, that we have to deal with. We have more things that we don't want to do, but we still have to do them because that's part of being in this land. But then there's also the zechuyot, the incredible things we get to build. We get to be ourselves. We get to build what we have to bring into the world. We get to make the world really a better place. Through being Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, and as I've said many times in the past half a year, it is very clear now who is on our side and who's on the wrong side of history, and even more so, it's very clear to the world now that Am Yisrael, that here in Eretz Yisrael, we are fighting the battle of Western civilization. We are on the front line of Western civilization. This is what happens when you come back to Eretz Yisrael. It brings its obligations with it. It brings its mechuyavuyot, but it's also the only place where we can be ourselves, and we get to develop ourselves, develop our nation, and through that, make the world a better place.
Exactly. And I think we're talking about Har Sinai and everything we're talking about, freedom. I think we can't not mention the famous words of Chazal when they talk about the luchot in Har Sinai being charut al luchot, that the words were carved into the luchot. And Chazal say, Al tikre charut el cherut. Don't call it carved into the stone, call it freedom. What does one have to do with the other? But that's exactly the point. True freedom is the things that are carved into who you are really. They're not just external, they're not just on the outside. The luchot, Har Sinai, is about who you truly are. The true cherut is not just leaving Mitzrayim and doing what you want. It's the opposite. It's reaching Har Sinai and accepting upon ourselves who we truly are, that true cherut, which we will be able to achieve if we follow that when we come to Eretz Yisrael.
Amen. We should all be zocher to see real cherut, real freedom coming into this world for us, for Am Yisrael, for the entire world around us, so that we can continue serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu out of the good things that the world has to offer, out of the beautiful things that the world has to offer. And Bezrat Hashem, see Mashiach can come very, very soon. Shkoyach Yitzi.
Amen, amen. Shkoyach Tuvia. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom and Hashem. We'll talk again next week.